I don't know what's more confusing, learning astrology or just being a human. Moonday Musings is here to help with that. A weekly, no bullshit guide for the upcoming cosmic forecast and how you can actually use this in your real life. Hello, my magical neighbor. Happy Monday, my friend. Happy Moon Day, and welcome back to another episode of Moonday Musings. If you've never been here before, hello, welcome. I'm so glad that you found our witchy little neighborhood here. I'm Danny. I'm that witch next door. I'll be your host, your guide, your mentor, your spiritual bestie in all things modern witchcraft and cosmic living. And this week's Moonday Musings episode is a quickie astro news and tarot reading for the week. Let's dive right into it, shall we? So on deck this week is the subject of retrogrades. Mercury stationed retrograde yesterday, Sunday, November 9th at 6 degrees Sagittarius. Jupiter stations retrograde tomorrow, Tuesday, November 11th, on the 1111 portal at 25 degrees Cancer. This is an interesting double retrograde time because Mercury is stationing retrograde in the sign of Sagittarius, which is a sign ruled by the planet Jupiter. And Jupiter will also be stationing in its own retrograde cycle. So it really adds, we get multiple planetary retrogrades, plenty, quite honestly. And we can tell when it happens. But this is an interesting kind of cosmically poetic one where we have two planets stationing retrograde very, very close to the same time. And one of those planets is ruling one of the signs where the retrograde cycle will begin. This could feel like a time just like a little particularly off your game. A little particularly funky right now. Emotional where we're not usually emotional. I wouldn't be surprised if we might even find ourselves to be a little apathetic where we don't normally find ourselves to be apathetic. There is a lot of recalibration that happens during a retrograde cycle. So we did a little intro to retrograde cycles episode on the podcast 3 whole years ago. I linked the episode in the show notes below if you want to go back and listen to it. If you are a member of that witch school, my monthly membership, you already have access to a resource called Retrograde Cycles 101. If you are a member of that witch school and you need help finding that resource, let me know, by the way. But I'll have that linked in the school for everybody so that hopefully it's a little bit easier to find. It's a really helpful article I created a while ago that just kind of lays the foundation and gives the basics of the purpose of a retrograde cycle. But it also has a really helpful table of the planetary retrograde cycle patterns. So how often Mercury stations retrograde each year and for how long, Venus, Mars, etc. So that's a helpful little resource for that witch school students. What I want to do today is kind of do a refresher on this, honestly, and maybe build even further than where we originally started, and in hopes that this really helps us navigate this particular retrograde cycle with some mindfulness, with, dare I say, a little bit of an open heart, a little extra willingness to learn, because really, ultimately, that's what retrogrades are for, my friend. What are they for? They're really for learning. And even more specific than that, they're for relearning. So the first time that I remember the concept of retrograde cycles just finally clicking with me was when I heard Colin Bedell of Queer Cosmos, whom I just look up to so much, as an astrologer. He has re-quoted this as well. This is something that he was also taught along the way as well. But the first time I heard him, that I came across him talking about a retrograde cycle as this opportunity for review, re-examination, and therefore redefinition, reconstruction, recalibration. It was life-changing for me, both as an individual and as a professional astrologer who, has to interpret these for a living, essentially. I have found that since reminding myself of the purpose of retrograde cycles every single time we have a planetary station like this, it has helped me just stay open to the learning and growth process. And at the very, very, very least, it has helped me be more patient and be a little bit more gracious with myself and with others during those times. I like to use a Mercury retrograde or a Jupiter retrograde as a time to say, let me offer a little bit of extra patience here. Let me give a little extra wiggle room here, instead of everything's fucked because Mercury is retrograde right now. Let me blame everything bad that's happening on Mercury retrograde. Where I think instead, where we really harness the power, especially of a planet like Mercury, which is this planet of wit and communication and humor in so many ways. I think that utilizing this approach of, oh, it's a retrograde, let's not take ourselves too seriously because things are supposed to be functioning in a different kind of off way right now. We can kind of laugh through this, or we can, shrug it off and take the next steps forward. That is how you remain open to what you're meant to be learning and meant to be experiencing during that time, instead of falling into cyclones of victim mindset or like quicksand of catastrophizing everything and just feeling consumed by negativity or paranoia that I honestly think people don't realize that, because so many people follow so many different astrology and metaphysical and energetic and witchy accounts, because we're so inundated by, oh, fuck, the retrograde is so bad. People don't realize how much that really does put large quantities of people into a deeply negative mindset, into a deeply paranoid perspective. And the way more effective mindset to be in is a little bit of a fuck it mindset. And, kind of this radical acceptance of life is not meant to always function the way that we're used to, or the way that we think we can depend on or rely on or expect. And there are many different parts of astrology, retrogrades included, that represent the universal law that things are imperfect and things are not supposed to be perfect. Things are meant to break down. Things are meant to have dysfunction. They're meant to. You're meant to. And it does take a little bit of radical acceptance, especially for those of us who are like recovering perfectionists, right? Or struggling perfectionists. It takes some radical acceptance to own I am meant to be dysfunctional at different times in my life. I'm meant to do things wrong sometimes. I'm supposed to fucking make mistakes. It's part of this whole living life gig. The more you can just like throw into that, I honestly think the better foot you just step into retrograde on. Truly, I really, really, really do believe that. These particular retrograde stations also begin after our full moon in Taurus last week, and we have a last quarter moon in Leo this week. So, you know, our pride is getting fucking checked right now, my friend. And you will also witness some other people this week and next week probably getting their pride a little fucking checked. Don't be so surprised when you're the one, though, that your pride gets a little checked. I'm sure I will be. I'm sure I'll be very thrown off when it happens. But that's the nature. That's, you know, that's that's the nature of the beast. So let's see here. I want to offer you a little retrograde tarot reading today. And before I do that, I want to offer you some retrograde prompts. These are prompts that you can use for any planetary retrograde, okay? No matter what planet is stationing retrograde, you can utilize these prompts for yourself. With the intention of what is this retrograde cycle meant to present me with. Okay, there are all kinds of ways to get really, really specific with your astrology studies and how you let that information kind of inform your self-reflection. So you can go really into the astrological details here and line them up with these prompts by, you know, going back to the last Mercury retrograde and looking up when those dates were and going back in your calendar and looking up what you were doing then. But there's also plenty of value you can get out of simply answering these prompts within a retrograde cycle. So I'll walk you through more of what I mean as we go. But the first prompt is, where do I feel the most challenged? Probably the most common denominator experience of a retrograde cycle is frustration, is feeling like things are hard and more difficult. So an excellent first step in the process and getting to the root of that and where the meaning is for you or the opportunity for learning is for you is to start with, where am I feeling the most challenged? Okay. What area of my life, what relationship, what task, what project, what source of stress, whatever it is, where am I feeling the most challenged? Number 2, how do I experience challenge in general? When I am challenged by something, how do I experience challenge? What emotions come up for me? Where do I feel this energy in my body? Naming the feelings and the physical sensations will be an excellently informative next step and glimpse into what's really going on for you, what this retrograde is really bringing up for you and offering to you for some review and redefinition. The next question is, what previous experiences remind me of what I'm currently going through? So one of the other most common experiences in a retrograde is the past resurfacing itself and coming back up again. Sometimes this is in the form of exes reaching out to us, old friends reaching back out to us that we are no longer friends with, estranged family members reaching back out to us, old jobs and bosses reaching back out to us. But it also can look like dreams about people of the past or past experiences or chapters of our lives. Can also look like going through experiences and events in our day-to-day that almost transport us back to those events and experiences that had such impacts on us. So name what you're currently being challenged in. Name what's coming up for you emotionally in that. And then ask yourself, what previous experiences or events that you've been through remind you of what you're going through right now? It might already be really, really obvious when you sit down to answer these, and it might not. So that's why I still want to put it on here. But that parallel is coming up for a reason. It's very much cosmically on purpose. It's the whole point of the retrograde. The next question is, how did I respond and react to those past experiences? So let yourself transport a little bit and reflect on how you handled it and how you moved through it. The next question clearly is, what have I learned about myself and the world since then? So reflect intentionally in your hindsight at that point. And really connect with your past self in that moment. Knowing now what you know that you did not know then. And give yourself a little bit of that context that you didn't know what you didn't know. And that because you didn't know what you didn't know and you experienced what you experienced, you do know what you know now. So the next question is, how can I let my experience inform my next step? So this is where the retrograde gets us to review and reflect and intentionally kind of go into the past for some very helpful hindsight and context. This helps us remember everything that we've learned since then and gives us brand new, fresh opportunity to apply what we've been learning. Retrogrades are super fucking important. You know how in school and when you're learning something, part of the learning process is like reviewing the basics or reviewing the most recent things that you've learned so that you're consistently exercising those muscles and those skills so that they don't go dormant. That's what the purpose, metaphorically, of a retrograde cycle is for a human experience. It's opportunity for reviewing what we've learned so that we stay strong in those skills and we continue sharpening those skills. We build wisdom from retrogrades. This is why we're meant to be dysfunctional sometimes. This is why we're meant to make mistakes. This is where our wisdom comes from, which is why my very last option for you is an optional tarot card pull. You could also, the reason I say optional is because you could also just answer this as a regular journal prompt as well. You could just continue answering this in your writing. I thought it would be a little interesting to open up to your higher self and your spirit team and maybe let them weigh in a little bit on this conversation and this particular question. What inner wisdom have I gained from my experience? All right, my friends, we are going to take a brief break from the podcast to thank today's episode sponsor, Podzilla Productions. Podzilla is my husband Jared's podcast editing and production company, and it is exactly why That Witch podcast has had such professional sounding audio since its very, very beginning. Any audio discrepancies that have ever happened are always a mishap on my end, recording wise. And every single time a little personal blunder like that has happened, which is just part of hosting a podcast and the entire journey of running your own show. Anytime those have happened, I have been just beyond grateful that I have a professional editor who knows how to still make it sound as good as it possibly can, especially when the episode that you recorded is so good and you feel so strong about it, or it's really, really important to your episode structure, your content plan, or it's just something you really care a lot about, or you put a lot of time and energy into. You don't have to waste hours, if not more, of your time trying to DIY and figure out every single editing issue that you come across. There is an editor out there. There really is somebody out there who believes that those committed podcast hosts who maybe aren't making as much as some of those big giant podcast hosts out there still deserve top quality and professional sounding audio at an affordable, actually affordable price. And that, my friends, is Podzilla Productions. Not only do you have everything editing wise covered, you also have somebody who can answer your questions about software and equipment and the room that you set up to record in. You don't have to become some overnight editor in order to have a fantastic sounding show. Save yourself loads of stress and time. Let somebody way faster and way more experienced handle that part of your podcast, and let yourself focus on what you do best, which is creating the content that you care so much about. You can get more info, a quote, get any questions answered by reaching out to Jared, going to podzillaproductions.com, or go to the show notes below to reach out to him directly. And now back to the show. All right. So when it comes to retrogrades, there are even more specific layers that you can factor in to really deepen the meaning or significance of a particular retrograde cycle for yourself. So, for example, let's utilize the current Mercury retrograde happening right now. Mercury is stationed retrograde, like I said, at 6 degrees Sagittarius. It might even be, it might already be in an earlier degree than that. It might have moved since then, honestly. And what you can do is you can either pull up the current transits or planetary positions in reference to your birth chart, or you can simply go to your birth chart and look and see where Sagittarius is and look and see where Scorpio is, because this Mercury retrograde cycle, Mercury will travel back through Sagittarius and actually dip back into Scorpio as well. So this particular Mercury retrograde cycle will span 2 signs, Sagittarius and Scorpio. We will see themes from both of those energies come up for us. What you're looking for is the house or houses that this occupies in your chart. That's going to give you even more specific direction for what this retrograde means for you. What areas of life are going to be highlighted, where this is going to show up the most for you. But honestly, I just want to say, before we go any further, I just want to say that even if, like I said, you just answer these questions without even pulling up the transits in your birth chart or anything, or knowing what house Mercury is currently in, you can still get a ton out of this time energetically for yourself on an introspective level just by opening up to these prompts and answering them honestly for yourself. Okay, so I just want to throw that out there. I think that a lot of times, there's a couple of different types of listeners to Moonday Musings. I've got all of my wonderful astrology students listening to Moonday Musings, whether you're literally a student of mine in that witch school or you're a spiritual student of mine, even if we've never met before, where you're really taking this information in because you want to learn about it, whether it's because you aspire to have a career in astrology, or you're just really interested in it and you want to utilize it more in depth and develop a practice around it. You really take this information in on Moonday and build in your skill set and your knowledge around it. But there are also our Moonday listeners who are really here to kind of absorb the astrological information and aren't necessarily, astrological students. They're not necessarily trying to learn every single nook and cranny of their birth chart, but they do resonate with astrology and going through the forecast each week or at the beginning or the end of the month. It still is this really helpful introspective space for them. You can use these prompts in the same way, regardless of what type of listener you are, regardless of how you are utilizing astrology and how in-depth you're going with astrology. These are really flexible and customizable for you. But if you are somebody who's trying to deepen your understanding of astrology, or you're trying to get an even more specific understanding of what this planetary retrograde means for you, this is the process that you would take. You would pull up a transit chart, or you would look at your birth chart and take a look and see where the signs that planet's going to be stationing retrograde in, where those are in your chart. Are there any other planets in that area? Those are going to be parts of yourself that are also highlighted by or kind of tested during this time. Maybe not even tested, but more questioned, thought-provoked, perhaps. And so if you do pull up your chart, you can utilize these prompts and maybe add some of the specifications that you're finding in your chart. So for example, where do I feel the most challenged? Maybe if this is taking place in your 5th house, you could say, when it comes to following my passions and creative interests and hobbies and following my heart, where do I feel the most challenged in that? So that's how you can add a little 5th house specific flavor to get even more out of this retrograde cycle for yourself. Now you can also add in the planetary meaning. So we have Mercury retrograde currently happening, and we are about to have Jupiter retrograde also happening. Retrograde has this common definition and purpose, but each planet has their own role in astrology, has their own role in the chart or role within ourselves. Mercury's role is over communication and learning and thinking, how we interact with each other, how we kind of interpret our environment, and that's why Mercury rules over our nervous system and thinking capacities, because it's not just how we interact with other people, it's how we interact with our entire life and how we're kind of constantly interpreting that experience and those interactions and constantly learning from it. So when Mercury is retrograde, this is why we can make a lot of miscommunication mistakes and a lot of communication mishaps happen because we interact with each other so freaking much with technology. There are tons of technology issues that arise during Mercury retrograde. A lot of our miscommunication happens because of technological glitches or mistakes or typos, for example. Now, in Jupiter is a planet that rules over our optimism and our pessimism, our expansion, aka our outlook and our perspective. Jupiter is our ability to visualize expansion for ourselves. And this is why it rules over our optimism and our pessimism. This is why Jupiter is considered an expander, because it expands whatever our outlook or perspective is focused on and amplifying. So when we are in a really optimistic space, we see that reflected back at us, and optimism and positivity expands all around us. And when we are in a really, really pessimistic place, that's what gets expanded on. And the negative is what we focus on and is what is, reflected back at us. So Jupiter in so many ways really truly represents our outlook, because our outlook is how we are able to even visualize and aspire to expanding beyond our capacities and expanding beyond our horizons. When Jupiter is retrograde, this is really, really getting us to confront what it is that we do focus on, or what we have been focusing on. Jupiter retrograde really is a big POV reset time. And because Jupiter's in Cancer, this really has a lot to do with our emotional mindset, with our emotional perspective. So this can be presented to us through different types of events and challenges that really play on our sensitivities, really play on our sensitivities, and get us to look at some of that victim mindset that we can slide into. Get us to look at those conclusions that we jump to 99% of the time from an emotional place. And where a lot of these mishaps come from in Jupiter retrograde are those misjudgments that we have. So for example, like those situations where you made assumptions. You assumed someone was seeing something or saying something or responding to something in a certain way. Come to find out, you were mistaken. Oh, that's what you meant that whole time. Oh, I thought you meant this. And so I really felt this way. Oh, and you kind of have that experience of, oh my God, I really 0 to 100 at that. And that's Jupiter in Cancer retrograde. That is these opportunities for seeing where we have been misplacing judgment, what we've been focusing on and where we can kind of zoom in, what we can also take into consideration that we haven't been because we've kind of had some blinders on. So there's lots and lots of ways to add even more specificity to the meaning of the retrograde by looking at what role that planet serves. There's lots of ways to look up what role a planet has. There's tons of amazing astrology books out there. There are great courses out there. We happen to have a very fine one ourselves inside of that witch school. Which is called the I Can Read My Astrology Inside and Out program, which is going to be available for purchase outside of that witch school very, very soon. So keep an eye out for that. But there's tons of places. Honestly, a quick Google search into what's the planetary significance of Jupiter. What does Jupiter mean in astrology? These are, I recommend doing a Google search and then going to credible websites and reading their articles. I do not recommend utilizing ChatGPT or AI summaries for astrology or tarot interpretations, and quite honestly, most spiritual symbolic interpretations. I have personally tested it multiple times, and I always find at least a few mistakes. Always, always, always. And the reason is because there's just so much, quite frankly, like just unregulated information out there in this industry and community, in the spiritual community. And because of the nature of AI and how it works, it takes all of that information into consideration. It doesn't weigh it for accuracy. It just takes all of it into consideration. It's a much simpler, more effective, and more accurate internet usage. If you're going to type out the question anyways, don't type it into ChatGPT. And I'm not even an anti-ChatGPT person. I think there's plenty of ways you can use AI in ethical and super helpful ways. And that's great. But for real, as an astrology teacher and a witchcraft mentor, I am promising you, anytime I've ever used an AI tool to test it for astrological information and education or tarot information, it's wrong. It's incorrect. There's at least always something wrong. So I don't recommend doing that. You're adding an extra step for yourself. So instead, go into Google and type in, what does Jupiter mean in astrology? Okay. Better yet, download a really good astrology app that you can input your birth chart information into, and it already has that information for you. So whether you use the Chani app or Astrograph, which is time passages, or AstroSeek or Astro Charts or AstroWiki, which is AstroDientis, which is astro.com. All of these are wonderful, wonderful resources. And not only do they give you your birth chart, they also have tables and charts you can download that explain what the purpose of each planet is, what the energy of each zodiac sign is. Again, we have those resources as well in that witch school. For all of my students, we have helpful cheat sheets and reference charts that you can pull up for the planets, for example. You can just pull up the planets reference chart, go to Jupiter, see keywords associated with it, the element associated with it, what signs it rules, the symbol associated with it, etc. If you are an all access member in that witch school, you also have access to the I Can Read My Astrology program, and you have all of those resources available to you, which is way more in depth, where you can go look up each planet or each sign and read much more about it that way as well. And again, wherever you get your information, whether you do a Google search, whether you get it out of a book or a blog article, whatever it is, take that context and carry it with you into these journal prompts. Whether you add some of those key words into them or you just keep it in mind while you answer them. That is a great way to start layering in the specifics of the planetary retrograde. Again, like I said, not necessary. It is plenty to just know that it's a retrograde period and to set some time aside to answer prompts like this. You will get plenty of self-reflection out of that. But if you are wanting to use the astrology a little bit further, a little more specific for yourself, those are some of the steps I would take. I would look up in your own chart, get a little more specific information there, and then I would utilize helpful online resources that explain a few characteristics of each zodiac sign, of each planet, so that when you hear Jupiter is retrograde in Cancer, you can read a little bit about Jupiter. You can read a little bit about Cancer, and then you can then you can answer some helpful journal prompts just like these and get more out of this time, because I promise you there is so much opportunity in retrograde. We learn so much from retrogrades. We do. I'm very pro retrograde. And I struggle with them, okay? By all means, let me just say, I don't skip through the meadows under rainbows with flowers floating all around me every retrograde, all right? It's fucking hard for me too. I also don't just bash myself in the head every single time a planet stations retrograde with, oh, I just struggle during this time. They're just hard for me. It's just hard. It's just a hard time. Okay. What are we doing with our hard? What are we doing with our hard? Because I would much rather do something with my hard than sit in it. All right? Okay. Let's do a little tarot reading. Let's open up to a little bit more from this particular retrograde period that we are in. Ooh, want to see the shadow card on the bottom of the deck right now? Because it's 10 of Swords. Just saying. All right, my friends, I'm going to shuffle. While I'm shuffling, I invite you to kind of reset your energy a little bit. Roll out your shoulders. If you are called to and it's safe to close your eyes, roll out your neck. Do some nice light stretching. Take some nice intentional deep breaths in and out. You could even pause this episode right here and take a nice, long, luxurious moment for yourself. But really let yourself reset, refresh your energy, and allow yourself to open up to any insight, any guidance, and any messages that you may be needing or seeking at this time. So I am utilizing, this is so funny, I am utilizing I love to blow on my decks to wake them up. Ooh. The Golden Universal Tarot deck, which is one of my favorites. It's also one of my very first decks I ever got. And we pulled reversed 8 of Wands, which just makes so much sense. We're also getting a little extra spiritual support from the Wild Unknown Animal Spirit deck today. And our friend from the water element showed up, which is the Otter. And I already find this extremely fitting. So let's dive right in here. 8 of Wands reversed. The 8 of Wands is this card of action. Lots of coming and going, but we don't even know which direction we're heading in. There's just tons and tons of action. And we're kind of just thrown into the middle of the action in this card, in the view and POV that we're given here. When the 8 of Wands is reversed, it's almost disorienting. And this is so indicative of that feeling and experience that a retrograde can bring us. So when we are used to our typical mode of movement, moving forward, moving forward, moving forward. And suddenly we embark on these, not even embark on, we're presented with these experiences and events and obstacles that come up in our path that cause us to either pause and have to go around, or they make us stop altogether, or they make us have to even start taking steps backwards and going the opposite direction we've been going in. And this experience, any of these experiences, can feel extremely disorienting. Disorienting is one of the biggest telltale signs of a retrograde cycle. It is, however, so incredibly necessary. When we just constantly keep blindly and monotonously moving forward at the same time, in the same way, at the same pace, we start getting desensitized. We start missing shit. We start losing out on stuff. We're not keeping our eyes open or our perspective and outlook fresh. And so there are these times where we are meant to, Eight of Wands can either be like a halt in action and needing to decrease in action. It can also be a sign of total overactivation and say, we are doing way too much. Burnout is on the horizon or has already arrived and you're still just like chugging through it. Now, let's hear what our cute little pal, the otter, has to say from the animal spirit deck here, with all of the context of this reversed Eight of Wands here. So the otter is part of the water suit here in the animal spirit deck. And in the guidebook, it says it's associated with unobstructed joy, playfulness, contentment. Perhaps the most joyful creature within the animal spirit deck, the otter represents absolute bliss. Otter energy is the playfulness of a child, available to us at any age. They have a giddiness and reverence for life itself, without the presence of doubt, worry, or skepticism. Imagine yourself with a little more otter energy. What would life look like? What would it take to bring you there? The otter card begs these questions and wants to transport us to that precious place as soon as possible. The celebration awaits. When otter energy is in balance, it's full of love and needs nothing. When out of balance, it's gloomy, sighs, and makes silly excuses. To bring otter energy into balance, a dance party or celebration is in order. First of all, what a helpful reminder, and thank you, Animal Spirit deck, and thank you, Otter Spirit, because I think that playfulness is a great way to lean into things being just shook the fuck up right now. Feeling disoriented? Lean into it. Feel disoriented. Maybe, I love the dance party. I have been doing these like singing outbursts. It's something that I've like always done, but I've been letting myself do it more and more around Blair and even Jared. And I have these very silly singing outbursts when I have these excessive buildups of energy moments or these big like emotional spikes. Especially if I make a mistake or I drop something or I trip or run into something, something that like pisses me off at myself, I have been having these like singing explosions to help me stay out of like a self-deprecating narrative so that I don't like take it out on myself and like be a big dick to myself. And instead, I try to like roll into some silliness instead. And so I love this so much because as this Mercury retrograde stations in Sagittarius and as Jupiter stations retrograde in Cancer, honestly, something that connects Mercury and Jupiter is joy. Really, joy, fun, both are very jovial. And playfulness is something both planets deeply, deeply value and are nourished from and thrive on. And so bringing the silliness, letting yourselves have some fun, just like we say at the end of every single episode, is, I think, a huge, huge key during these particular retrograde cycles, my friend. So I hope that today's episode helps you keep an open mind to these retrograde periods and any future ones that we inevitably encounter. I also hope that they help you go a little bit deeper into the why and the meaning and the purpose and the role that a retrograde cycle has for you in your life, so that you can continue learning and you can continue growing your own wisdom. I know I'm taking this in deeply myself in this week and into the weeks to come, my friend. I am right here with you. So thank you, neighbor, for your time today and every day. It was always such a pleasure and honor. I will see you very, very soon for another special episode of That Witch Podcast. And until then, make sure, of course, that you're out there staying safe. You're letting yourself have some fun, and stay magical out there, my friend. If you are a big fan of That Witch Podcast and everything we do here in our witchy neighborhood, I would be so grateful if you could head over and give us a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This is something that helps boost our reach for the show, and it lets so many others know that what they're getting here at That Witch Podcast is really, really good quality stuff. It only takes a couple of minutes and it's totally free, and it makes a huge, huge difference from one witch to another. Thank you so much for your support, neighbor.